Hey there, guys. So, some of you have already started asking, how do I rank 1 the Selachimoth without using Abigail? So, we're going to go to the Selachimoth and do a rank 1 clear without Abigail. Now, let me tell you right up front, it is very, very hard to rank 1 this boss not using Abigail, but it is doable, and we're going to do it with Cecil tanking. Now, because Cecil is obviously not made for the fight, and it's really made for Abigail, we have to use a bunch of support units, meaning the only real DPS we have on the party is the near units, 2B and A2. They have to carry the damage cap, and it's not going to be a super overkill damage cap, meaning it's a little tight. So, not using the recent banner unit always is very tricky. So it's not like a budget run, but if you just don't want to pull for Abigail, but you do have powerful DPS and we can bring a bunch of supports, we're going to do it. So here's the party. Let's get in here and get it clear, and I'll explain things as we go. Turn chart will be in the comments, etc. Okay, so first of all, the ambush. Got to deal with it. Not that big a deal. So, okay, we're going to do Cecil start in the base form for his field, go to the shift form. Also, we're using some auto buffing in the base form. I'll show you that when we get there. Now, in this order, this is critical. We're going to use his Omni cover first. That has to be the first thing clicked, but this is going to give him 90 mitigation for turn 1. So Omni cover, then we're going to use his break, then we're going to use his regular cover. That is going to put up the 90 mitigation and then override the Omni with his regular cover. We don't want him Omni covering, but we do want that 90 mitigation. And credit to Resonant for giving me that idea. I kind of overlooked that interaction, but that's really helpful for Cecil surviving on turn 1. But it's still a ton of damage. We're going to use Albed Girl Riku to do her LB. That's going to be for a 30,000 point barrier on turn 1. Very helpful because gravity ignores barriers. It only goes to the direct HP. So it's going to be very helpful for surviving. Sylvie is going to do on turn 1 Compassionate, Vines, and Petals. Notice we are not using her Magnus yet because Cecil has 90 mitigation, so her Magnus would be just obsolete on turn 1. We're going to save it for turn 2 to get more turns of duration for her Magnus. Now, Roberta is going to Morale Fill, then Aqua and Insect mitigation for yet more mitigation on turn 1. Then A2 is going to Inorganic for the Imbue. We're going to do Finisher for the defense break and then offensive heal combo. 2B is going to do True Charge for the Imbue and then double bolting for the morale fill. Now, there is still a little bit of RNG. If the boss goes crazy on Force Waves or Mystic Waves, I don't know, the hard-hitting attack, Cecil might still die. So again, if you die on turn 1, you retreat, come back in. But most of the time, Cecil should survive this first turn. And what's it called? Mystic Force. Mystic Force is the bad one. Yeah. I mean, if you're not using Abigail, this boss freaking hurts a lot. So with all that mitigation, everything, the big barrier, Cecil still survived. I think the boss did 2 Mystic Forces, so that wasn't the worst outcome. If he had done a third one, Cecil would have died. We'd have to retreat and come back in. But as long as Cecil survives turn 1, just like the other clear, you should mostly be in the clear. It's not a guarantee, though. It's still going to be a hard fight. All right, let's go to turn 2. Turn 2, Cecil is going to use his cover again. We're going to break the boss again, and we're going to use Kurega to help him get a little bit of healing. Albed Girl Riku is going to end Lytra to imbue the party, or specifically imbue Roberta, with Light Element. Then we're going to Eccentric for the LB fill, and Ultra Potion for the healing. Ultra Potion is a relatively strong healing. So there we go. So our Cecil is mostly topped back up. Now we're going to use the big mitigation with Sylvie, Burgeoning Defense. We're also going to Vines and Petals, basically for the morale fill. Roberta is going to morale fill. We're going to use her Magnus And we're going to do support from the skies. You don't need Mirage, but that's just a bigger stat buff. And now we're going to fill some morale with our near unit. So triple True Charge and just triple offensive heal combo just to fill the morale. These fill the morale more than the other skills do. This is not really for damage. So here we go. Now turn 2 is a pretty minor turn. The boss won't really do anything. There's still the chance of a bunch of Mystic Forces. He actually did a bunch of them, but turn 2 is just nowhere near as bad as turn 1, so you're fine. There we go. Now, turn 3 is going to be another crazy, crazy painful turn. In order to deal with this, we're going to guard our Cecil. Riku is going to LB yet again for the barrier. Sylvie is going to shift here. Yeah, you need to gear your Riku for LB fill. And if your Riku is EX3, the rotation would need some adjusting for EX3. It would still work, but it would definitely need a little bit of tweaking. I haven't really thought that through, but if you've got an EX3 Riku, just adjust the rotation because your SLB will be ready on different turns. Sylvie is now going to do Insect Killer on 2B. We're going to do Offense, and we're going to do Cheerful to fill the morale gauge. We're going to go to the base form with Roberta and do her LB. And now we're going to do the shifted LB of 2B and triple finisher. So we're going to get a little bit of damage on this turn. Not a super ton of damage, but we got to start working the boss towards that threshold. Okay, so turn 3, very painful turn. Thankfully, we've got a 30,000 point barrier. So here's the big gravity and then some follow-up attacks. Now again, he did a triple force. My God, this boss, triple force is the literal worst possible outcome. But thankfully, Cecil still survived because he's a boss. Cecil is awesome, but it's not really his Clash of Wills. But he was really freaking hurt. My God, why so many... This boss is irritating. This boss is real irritating. So Cecil's very hurt right now. Normally, Cecil won't be this damaged, but you do what you can. Okay, so on turn 4, what we're going to do is we're going to cover again, break the boss's attack and magic again, and we're going to Kurega, which is going to do a little bit of healing. We're also going to use the SLB of Riku, because again, this is going to be another painful turn. So the SLB is a 50,000 point barrier. So that is we're going to definitely survive at this point. We're going to use Sylvie to do her shifted LB on this turn for the modifier buff, etc. We're going to go to the base form of Roberta, she's already there actually, and we're going to refresh the aquatic and insect killer, and we're going to do Mega Breath to unlock her quad cast. Now 2B is going to go to the base form, and we're going to triple R40. And we're going to triple finisher and start dealing some damage. Because again, we got to start pushing that boss towards that threshold. So we're going to go ahead and chain this up a little bit. That's also going to refill 2B's LB for the next turn. And at this point, your morale should be capped out. So this is another gravity plus nuke turn. Thankfully, this turn is nowhere near as bad as before, and we had 50,000 point barrier from Riku's SLB, so we're good. Now, we're going to go ahead and use the LB of Cecil this turn for the mitigation, the breaks, etc. Because this is going to be another relatively safe turn. We're going to use Riku to end Lytra. We're going to Ultra Potion, and then we're going to Eccentric yet again. Sylvie is going to do Insect Killer on 2B again. We're going to Clever twice. And let's see, so now we're going to go ahead and do some damage. Now the boss does have the defense and spirit buff this turn, so the damage is going to be kind of nerfed, but in order to get the turn rotations to line up properly, we got to do it this way. So we're going to do that. We're going to Hateful Blade on A2, and we're going to quad Mystic on our Roberta. And we're going to go ahead and deal some damage. So we're going to click Roberta first to get the chain built a little bit, and then we're going to chain these guys and deal some damage. Now, you don't want to actually push the threshold yet. So if by some miracle you're pushing the 50% threshold on that turn, take it down a notch. Just, break your chain intentionally, do something, but don't push the threshold. What you do want to get close as you can to the 50 threshold without going over. Because this turn, we need to push that threshold. This is a little tricky. We got to push the threshold on this turn. So we're going to, in order to reset the boss's rotation, because this is going to be another painful turn if you don't reset the rotations, we got to do it this way. So we're going to use the LB of Riku. This is going to barrier again. Cecil is going to cover, break, and Kurega. We're going to have Sylvie go back to the base form, and we're going to Compassionate Petals and Vines to reapply all those mitigations and such. We're going to reload. We're going to Quad Mystic again with Roberta. 2B is now going to True Charge for the Amp, and double R40. Yeah, make sure I'm doing this right. And then we're going to Inorganic and double Finisher with our A2. So this needs to push the threshold. So this is a little tricky. We got to push that 50 threshold on this turn. Thankfully, we should, for the most part, so we over pushed it by a decent chunk. Well, by 2%. And as you see, the boss's threshold is still bugged. It's not actually locking at 50, but as long as the boss gets 250, you're fine. And that resets his rotation to the beginning of the rotation, and now we're good. The boss also has Mirage. Now, we're going to be killing the boss on turn 9, just like the previous clear. So now we're going to start getting set up. So what we're going to do, Sylvie is going to do her Shifted LB this turn for mod buffs, stat buffs, etc. We're going to use Roberta to triple. We're going to refresh the Aqua and Insect Killers. We're also going to use Mega Breath. That's going to eat 1 charge of the Mirage. We're going to go to the Shift form with 2B, and we're going to do the Shifted LB, 2nd charge of Mirage. A2 is going to use her SLB, 3rd charge of Mirage. Cecil is going to cover, break, and Kurega. That is the 4th charge of Mirage. And then Riku is going to end Lytra, Eccentric, and Ultra Potion. Basically, don't really worry about the Mirage. It'll be gone by the time we need it. Okay, some more attacks. Turn 7 is a very minor turn, so no big deal. It does hurt though. The boss freaking hurts. There's no getting around that. So turn 8 is going to be a very painful turn. We're going to guard Cecil, and we're going to SLB our Riku. This allows us to 50,000 point barrier to help survival. Sylvie is going to, let's see here. We're going to Insect Killer on 2B. We're going to Offense, and we're going to Clever again. Making sure I'm doing this right. Yes. Actually, my turn chart is wrong. We want Clever. Okay. Roberta is going to use her LB. 2B in the base form is going to... Actually, hold on. A2 is going to Yorha and double Finisher. And in the base form, we're going to Supreme and double R40 with 2B, and this is going to refill their LBs, put up the Amplify, and deal a little bit of damage, so the boss is closer to 50. So there we go. Okay, here's the painful turn. We've got a 50,000 point barrier, so even if the boss does forces, Cecil is fine because gravity doesn't go through barrier, or doesn't affect the barrier. So your Cecil should always survive that turn. Now it is time to kill the boss and do your burst. So 2B, base form LB, Roberta, Quad Mystic, A2, Hateful Blade. Riku is going to use her LB to weave in the chain. Also, just in case we don't kill the boss, this will give us a little bit of barrier for next turn. It'll give us another turn to finish the boss off. And then we're going to triple Clever with Sylvie. Okay, so we're going to click our Roberta first, give it just a second to build that chain so the rest of the real DPS can come in here at the maximum chain modifier. And this should be the end of the boss. Once the big caps at the end come in, boom, you're good. That should be a 2.5 or better, and the boss is dead. 2.8. So, we had a 3 billion or a 300 million leeway. We overkilled by a decent chunk. That seems to be about an average roll. I've gone as high as 2.9 in testing, or 2.6, but I've always gotten 2.5 and killed the boss on that turn. So there we go. There's a perfect score using Cecil without using Abigail. But obviously, as you can see here, the near units hard carry that DPS, and that allows us to fit more support like Riku for Cecil, because without Abigail, you just need all the tools in the toolbox to make your tanks survive. And we did. Riku's barrier was critical for that clear. And there it is. And Roberta, you know, her damage is very bad these days, but she did something, and there we go. So turn chart will be in the comments. I will have turn chart in the comments, yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the gear we use. So as far as unit swaps, who do you swap Cecil for? Abigail. Okay, if you don't have Abigail or Cecil, another option would be Silent Knight Charlotte. She has a 99% magic mitigation, which you can use on turn 1, and she has 80% either insect or aqua. It's one of the ones to this boss for the rest of the fight. That said, you're probably going to want an EX2 or EX3 Silent Knight Charlotte, and I know basically no one pulled for her, so that might be a tall order. Hopefully people have Cecil because he is a really good unit, and I think he is the second best tank for this, other than Silent Knight Charlotte and Abigail, because they have the racial mitigations. Triumphant General Celeste does have aqua mitigation at 80%, but she is so squishy, I don't think she'd work. That said, I didn't try her. Maybe she would. Who knows? Anyway, Sylvie is kind of a big deal here, so if you don't have her, why haven't you pulled her on like the 5 different rerun banners and unit selects and all that she's come out on? Albed Girl Riku, there's no good swap for her. Maeve, maybe, because Maeve does have big barriers. I think Maeve's biggest barrier is 30,000, whereas Riku has a 50,000 barrier. But the reason Riku is really good is because she also imbues light for Roberta. That said, you give Roberta a light weapon. It just deal way less damage. But also Riku has big healing. If you remember, some turns Cecil was at like 5,000 HP. Well, Ultra Potion on Riku is like a 25,000 point healing per cast. It really helps to get Cecil topped back up. So she's a little critical here. And if yours is EX3, that will mess up the timing for the LBs, because the SOB will go on turns you don't want it to go on. If that's the case, you know, just play around with it and try to get it to where it works for you. Roberta is chosen basically just because she has aqua and insect mitigation at 30%. And that's really good for Cecil to survive throughout the entire fight. It's an extra 30% mitigation on top of the other mitigations. And then the near units, they're not doing anything specifically critical other than just really big boy damage. And if you don't have them, I gotta be completely honest here, there's no one that does as much damage as the pair of them. Like, Ayaka and Cleome both deal more damage than A2, but as a conjunctive pair, or whatever you want to say, like, if you brought Ayaka and Cleome together, they're not really compatible because they're doing different elements. It's messing up your stuff. You can try it. I don't know. Maybe it'll work. But, yeah. I don't really. I'm gonna play with more clears over the weekend that use different DPS than the near units, but I gotta be honest, I'm probably gonna take Abigail for the other clears that use different DPS, because, you know, if I'm dropping all this big brigade of support units, then I'm going to need a tank that does all the support in one slot, so I can bring more DPS if I'm using weaker DPS. You know what I mean? Anyway, here's the gear we used. So Cecil, in the base form, is using the Celestite Rod, his TMR. Now this, we didn't really need this because we are using, because we're using Roberta, but I wanted to put this on just as an example. If you're not using Roberta, put this on Cecil's base form. It's an automatic, permanent 10% aqua killer. It's just free mitigation. But if you're using Roberta, we've got better anyway. But if you're not using Roberta, stick that on him. Other than that, some auto buffing and whatever. Shift form is decent fire and light resist. You want 350% after a buff. We are using Sylvie's 80% buffs. So all you really need is 270 fire and light. We've got 300 to both, whatever. Give him a source of regeneration if you can. So we've got Eurisha's headband for a decent chunk of HP regen. It does scale on Spirit, because keeping him alive is a tricky part of this clear. So any kind of healing you can. Another source of healing is Phoenix Synergy. This is an auto-cast 5,000 HP per turn. It's just more healing because we don't really have all the free actions to actually heal the tank. So as much passive healing as we can get. Status immunity, of course. And then other than that, just bulk. And here it is. There's the bulk we're using. Power cut card because it gives a lot of HP. Just use your best card if you don't have that, etc. Sylvie, we are dual wielding a Always Watch Over Me card. And she's provoking. It's not a big deal to make her provoke, but if someone else is provoking except your tank, then on turn 2, the single target magic attack will go towards someone else. Then Cecil will cover, and it'll activate Cecil's cover mitigation. So you'll take slightly less damage on turns 2, 4, and 7 if someone else is provoking. If your tank is provoking, they'll take the single target hit as the first hit. They won't activate cover mitigation, and you'll take 4 times extra damage. So someone else provoking reduces damage a little bit. Other than that, dual wielding a morale card, and the rest of the team, their bulk doesn't really matter. I did give her a lot of LB fill so that she can get her LB again, guaranteed. Albed Girl Riku is using a holy weapon so she can always seal the boss. Other than that, she really doesn't really matter. She's got a bunch of LB fill. She's got 1000% fill rate and 12 LB per turn, so she can spam her barrier as often as possible. Make sure the LB is maxed out. And at max level, it only costs 40 crystals, so it's relatively easy to spam. And there it is. The rest of the gear doesn't really matter. Make sure she's immune to Paralyze and Confusion. And then we dual wielded on the Always Watch Over Me card for more morale gain. 2B, both forms, status immunity, LB damage versus Bugs and Aqua. There it is, maxed on everything. She is our primary DPS unit. We'll come back to Roberta. A2 is she's our primary defense breaker. So the only defense breaker we had was the 85% on finisher. So she was our defense break. So if you replace A2, you got to get a good defense break from somewhere else. Other than that, status immunity and just damage versus Aqua and Insect. And then in the shift form of Roberta, Obsidian Bracer, we gave her this because it gives morale per turn. If you don't have this, it's not that big a deal. Morale wasn't hard in this clear. Some LB fill, kind of whatever. The Dazzle card. This is only really because of the killers, and honestly, Roberta gears for the killers easily anyway, so this is not a super big, and Roberta's damage was garbage anyway, so if you don't have the Dazzle card, don't sweat it. If you do have it, it is good to use. We are using a double hand katana build. The katana from Cleome is actually a lot better, but that's more recent. I didn't want to use that, so we're using the janky old katana from Cal. If you don't have this, you can use what's it called? The katana from Laswell, the Purple Lightning upgraded. You can also go with a double-handed spear build if you wanted to, or whatever weapon you want. Her damage is super bad regardless, so no matter what weapon you give her, it's bad damage. Other than that, double hand. Some chain speed, like her. Honestly, she's here for one reason and one reason only. She's here for the 30% mitigations to the races, and that's really it. And there it is. There's the clear. Turn chart will be in the comments. I know it's not really a budget run, but it is a no Abigail rank 1. So hope it helps. And now I'll work on some no near clears. I know I've used the near units in both clears, so we're gonna drop the near girls and bring in some other DPS for the re-clears. See you in a bit.